During the final years of World War II, far from the chaos of Europe, an extraordinary story unfolded in the heart of Texas, one that would blur the lines between enemies and friends, cruelty and kindness. As the war raged on, Allied forces captured not only soldiers but also nurses, clerks, and female auxiliaries who had served in German military units near the front. Most of these women were young, barely out of their 20s. They had been swept up in the machinery of war, and now, as captives, they were shipped thousands of miles away to the United States. When their ship reached New York Harbor, the women expected hostility. They expected to be mocked, or worse. But instead, American soldiers treated them with a kind of quiet formality. There were no jeers, no harsh words, only orders, firm but fair. From New York, they were placed on a long train bound for the South. Their destination, Texas. The journey was long and silent. Through the small train windows, the women watched as green forests turned into dusty plains. When they finally arrived, the Texas sun hit them like a furnace. The air shimmered with heat. Before them stretched miles of red earth, low hills, and open sky, and in the distance, horses grazing near wooden fences. They had arrived at a prisoner of war camp, but it looked nothing like the grim camps of Europe. Beyond the barbed wire, they could see cowboys in wide-brimmed hats riding across the fields. The contrast was surreal. The camp's commandant, Captain Robert Jenkins, was a tall, weathered Texan who greeted them with a polite nod and said, "Ladies, you'll be treated fairly here. You'll work, you'll eat, and you'll be safe." The German women exchanged uncertain glances. They didn't know if they could trust him. They expected chains, confinement, humiliation. Instead, they were given work clothes, gloves, and wide-brimmed hats to shield them from the Texas sun. Their work was nothing like what they feared. They weren't forced into back-breaking labor or confined to cells. They helped with simple ranch work, mending fences, picking cotton, gathering eggs, and milking cows. At first, they were suspicious. Was this kindness a trick? But soon, they realized it wasn't. The Texans treated them not as enemies, but as people. One morning, something remarkable happened. Captain Jenkins ordered a line of horses saddled near the corral. The German women stood watching, confused. "Are they going to parade us?" one whispered. Another murmured, "Maybe we're being transferred." But then one of the cowboys, a cheerful man named Tom, laughed and said, "No ma'am, you're riding." The women stared in disbelief. Riding?
Yes, ma'am.
Horses?
You ever ridden before?
None of them had. And yet, within minutes, they found themselves helped into saddles, reins placed gently into their hands. For the first time since being captured, they felt something they hadn't felt in months: freedom. As the horses began to move, the women clung nervously to the reins. The cowboys guided them patiently, teaching them how to sit tall, how to control the animal beneath them. Soon the horses began to trot, and laughter echoed across the open fields.
Genuine, joie fut l'auteur.
For these women, who had seen nothing but war, destruction, and loss, this moment felt unreal, a dream under the endless Texas sky. Days passed, and then weeks. The routine became familiar. They worked during the day, helped around the camp, and sometimes rode with the cowboys in the evenings. At night, they would gather near the campfire where the Texans would play guitars and sing. Slowly, the German women began to join in, shyly at first, then with smiles. They even taught the cowboys a few German folk songs, and the men responded with country tunes that filled the warm night air. The camp, though still surrounded by barbed wire, began to feel less like a prison and more like a small, strange community. Letters written by some of the women later described those nights, how the Texans shared their food, their stories, and their music. "We were enemies," one woman wrote, "but they treated us as guests." The war eventually came to an end. When the announcement reached the camp, the women were silent. They should have felt joy, the war was over, and they would soon go home. But many wept quietly. They weren't ready to leave. The Texans who had guarded them felt the same bittersweet ache. On the morning of their departure, Captain Jenkins and his men gathered to say goodbye.
The cowboy gave small gift, a handkerchief, a small horse show, a photograph.
One of the women, a nurse named Anna Keller, held back tears as she looked at the camp one last time. "If only the world could be like this place," she said softly.
Nos chiens, juste understanding.
The train carried them away through the endless Texas plains, the same plains where they had once ridden free. The women pressed their faces to the glass, watching the land vanish behind them. When they returned to Germany, the country they found was in ruins, cities reduced to rubble, families scattered, futures uncertain. And yet, amid the devastation, they carried memories that seemed impossible to others. When they spoke of cowboys, horses, and campfires in Texas, people didn't believe them. "Americans treated you kindly?" they were asked. But the women smiled and said, "Yes. More kindly than we ever imagined." Years later, a few of them returned to Texas, no longer as prisoners, but as immigrants seeking a new life. They found the same skies, the same ranches, and even a few of the same cowboys who once guarded them. And in that wide land, they built new lives, raising families and telling their children stories of the time when compassion crossed the boundaries of war. It is said that Captain Jenkins never forgot them either. In his old age, he often rode out at sunset and said to visitors, "Those women, they were tougher than half the men I ever met. And they never once tried to run." Perhaps they didn't need to. The Texas plains had already given them the one thing war had taken away, their dignity. And so their story lives on, whispered across the wind and the wide open land. A story of how, in a world torn apart by hate, a handful of cowboys taught the world a lesson in humanity, by giving their prisoners not chains, but horses.